Pretty much faster. Yep. So we didn't necessarily have that issue, and now we are live. So, yo, we back with another episode of Eavesdrop. Thank you, everybody, for joining us again today. For waiting, we are a little tad late. We tried to be able to use some new tech that we became aware of, but that didn't necessarily go as planned. So, like every other time, before we had these conversations, I would love if everybody could hit the like button, the share button, and leave some comments. As we saw on the IG, the question today is, while we having our discussion, if you want to be a person that calls in, what is it? Is this important in terms of this being the first Black chair of the United Negro College Fund, which is a Black marketed social political institution? Or does it matter at all? Are the people who are, I guess, confused, baffled, or taken aback by this, do they have any merit? Should they have any merit? Does it matter, or is everybody tripping? So with that being said, we're going to get through the set, and we're going through the set. We got to get through our articles. We got to get through the conversation. And with that being said, before I move on, if you are available, DC Young Democrats, we are having our general bodyship meeting on March the 25th at 6:30. If you want to come through, we're doing the program for Women's History Month. So we're going to have Brooke Pinto and as well as Christina Henderson. We're waiting on those two in terms of having a conversation about, some of the things that they have going on. So with all that being said, please go ahead, head over and engage in that way, or you can just go ahead and like in the, like it on Facebook, like it on IG, because it's posted there as well. Did you have anything that you wanted to do in terms of house cleaning, kind sir?
Good evening, good people. This is Inquisitive Q. You can follow me at Inquisitive Q, Inquisitive_Q at Instagram. One of the great things about this platform is that it allows us to have a broader discussion, civic focus with a number of people. Also, please subscribe to our website because we have Sage Talk over there. Some exclusive content. We want to really build the community there so that it becomes easier for me personally to engage with the audience, to build a community, to see where we're having these conversations, how we can have these conversations better, and more importantly, when the come on vid, you gotta go. The vid released the chains on us, we can get together and have symposiums, have conversations that's not with the constraints of technology, so we can be on time if you are an on time type. I try my best to be fashionably late so the host doesn't have too much pressure. But it's also important that we have that in-person connection. But in the meantime, go over to thegildedsages.com and read those white papers, man.
And you heard it. What's the name of the white papers?
Man, it's been so long. The first white paper,
America's Nurse, is my favorite.
America's Nurse. I went back and I looked at America's Nurse. It's like, okay, I'm gonna represent them in the next set. I got the next set to come through. But the first white paper is I_IS. I love AAV, African American Vernacular English, because people think of it as Ebonics, but it really isn't Ebonics. It's just a different way that we do call and answer and respond. But I_IS is an introduction into why I decided to use white papers as a way to make gray literature for the gray market, meaning using the format of this very bureaucratic system to have a discussion about the the inside of the African diaspora. So the first one is IAS and why I started IAS. Then the second one is social capital, plug the capital, drain the opportunity. That one really is focused on mostly predominantly the labor of Black American men and how Black American men coming off the plantation were thrown right back into a system of bondage using the exclusion of the 13th Amendment in case of imprisonment, except for imprisonment, and how that continued to fracture the Black American family in the South. And then America's Nurse focuses predominantly on Black American women and the labors expected of Black American women. You have Dr. Stephanie Jones Rogers, who contributed with her work. They were her property that showed that in chattel slavery, there was a very close attempt. I'm not speaking on Dr. Stephanie Jones Rogers' work at this moment, this is my interpretation, that you can see that in chattel slavery in America, there was an attempt to domesticate Black Americans, especially after that exploitation, after the importing of Africans from the continent was banned. We still had the inter trade amongst Americans, and you can really see in Dr. Stephanie Jones Rogers' work how the Black women were used for their reproductive labor that was very unique amongst Black American women, and especially in Harriet Washington, you can see medical apartheid, how Black American women were expected to contribute to the medical advancements of America. So getting to those so we can have a much broader conversation about the different ways racism plays out in a Black American family structure. Mm-hmm. So we can have a much more nuanced approach in our ads. And when we use targeted universalism, which is another approach of intersectionality, we can come with very detailed ads. Our ask is no longer so broad as what we need for this people, we need it for that people. Social justice become a more holistic approach.
Okay. And with that being said, we're gonna jump right into it. So again, if you're watching, like the video, please share the video. That helps us with algorithms, that helps us with getting the message out. This is a social initiative built around consistency, so we definitely need the engagement. That's highly important more than anything else. So thank you for those of all who do it. And so we're going to jump right into it. United Negro College Front. What you're looking at is an article from News One. This is written by Bruce C.T. Wright on March 17th, 2021. United Negro College Fund elects the first ever African-American chair of the board in its nearly 77 history. And as we jump down, the historic first for Black folks just keep pouring in. This time it manifested itself in the form of the foremost organization providing financial aid and broad support for Black college students, announcing the recent election of its first ever African-American chairman of the board. The United Negro College Fund elected Milton C. Jones to the chair of the UNCF Board of Directors last week and made the formal announcement Tuesday with an official press release that lauded the Atlanta businessman and civic leader becoming the first African-American to hold the position. We're going to jump down a little bit further. There's some tweets we got going on here. No, I'm not making that up, is what he said. But as we go further now, Jones succeeded William F. Stasia Sr., a white man who was chairman of the UNCF board for the past 11 years. The press release also listed the people who held the position before him, including John D. Rockefeller III and businessman Michael H. Jordan and Jack Stahl, all white men. Patriarchy is which I'll refer to them as. Considering the history behind a renowned philanthropic organization founded nearly 77 years ago, its primary objective is always and has been to eliminate socioeconomic barriers that stand in the way of pursuing higher learning by raising money to pay for Black students, college educations, and fund historically Black colleges. Conventional wisdom might suggest its board was not just always chaired by a Black person, but also compromised or comprised of mostly Black people. I'm going to stop sharing right there for a hot second to jump in, because I wanted to touch to the actual point where they talked about the mission of the organization, which was predicated on eliminating socioeconomic barriers that stood in the way of African Americans pursuing higher education, and then just the overall, because as you know, most people pinpoint education as the equalizer of the racial, what we know as the racial wealth gap, or what we understand to be the racial wealth gap, right? And so I thought it was interesting. I saw this put out by Kid on Stage. It was a comedy skit, and I thought it was interesting that a lot of people, the feedback was that people were surprised that you had John D. Rockefeller and a series of white men who headed the organization prior to this individual, Mr. Jones, who is being the first African-American chair of a organization that is Black marketed, Black targeted, in terms of who it's, like they said, who its membership is, and who its focus should be, but doesn't necessarily always quite pan out, which we'll get into later. But I just thought it was interesting because there's a myriad of institutions that a lot of people revere and love that also have similar organizational frameworks in terms of Black African-American people not being the helm, despite them coming on as an ambassador or co-founder, like i.e. Diddy, Charlemagne the God, etc. What are your thoughts on this being, just first alone, this being the first Black UNCF chair, and John D. Rockefeller, who has a history of race practices as a family, as an institution? And I wouldn't even say, no, racist, but it transcends pillaging just us in the fact that they have also undermined labor as a whole throughout America's history. Because I mean, yeah, we were the first, but also when we talk about the evolution of what America is and what it means to be an American, those same tactics are also used across the spectrum of what I guess we would identify or know today as POC. So it doesn't stop at it. It started with us, but doesn't stop at us.
I'm tickled over here. I'm doing my best not to laugh because it's just like, why are you surprised? Anyone who understands institutional building knows that building an institution requires a lot of money, requires a lot of talent, requires a social capitalism in which you have affluent people who may not have the necessary skill to teach other people to facilitate the ongoing continuation of the institution. But if you can pull up William Julius Wilson and go to page 10, the joint I sent you, because this is a better, it grounds what I'm saying better than I could, because I don't want to go on a long extended rant, because I'm doing my best not to laugh.
I got you, kind sir.
Yeah, I'm doing my best not to laugh because it's hard not to laugh at this. It's like, what do you
poverty and race?
Yes.
Yep. Here you go. Sorry. Wrong.
Is it still highlighted?
Yep.
Go to page 10, please.
Go to page 10?
Yes.
Yep.
Go down, scroll down. Okay, done. Page, this is Dr. I'm gonna go back to the top. This is May, June 2009, volume 18, number 3, Poverty and Race Research Action Council. More Than Just Race, Being Black and Poor in the Inner City by William Julius Wilson. And I'm gonna skip down to page 10 because this isn't the whole thing. But in most of this, he's really talking about when you do sociological research, especially about Black people, you must include culture, because being isolated and subjugated from mainstream America or white culture, whilst white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, and being separated from all things shapes this. So I'm going to the subheading here, and this is going to be quick. The relative importance of culture and culture matters. Culture matters, but I would have to say it does not matter nearly as much as social structure. And stop sharing right there, please. And that's when it becomes important when we mention that the chair of these organizations are white, because their frame of references are going to be white. Their experiences are going to be white. So when we speak about the legacy of America being a segregated space, we have to understand that there's been multiple generations, raised in separate spaces. When we talk about the achievement gap, it's really hard because I think Business Week came out and started showing figures of the Homestead Act and what the Homestead Act did for capital, then what the GI Bill did for capital. So when we start talking about the achievement gap, we really need to talk about how when Black Americans were taken and used as a commodity, there was never anything to fulfill the economic need to be considered an American. And that was Frederick Douglass' appeal in 1865 when he says, I know what the Black man wants, talking about coming off the plantation and wanting enfranchisement. Because if you have the power to vote, you have the power to dictate your social structure. And when you have a chairman that has the resources to veto what the board wants or the direction of the board, you have to appeal to that chairman's sensibilities. So when you're not cognitive or aware that you have to appeal to someone who does not necessarily understand your culture, that's when you start playing those games that people say, you gotta play the game, play the game. What game are you playing? The game of white approval? Because you want a white person to approve of you to say that you are capable of making money.
Yep. And can I just intercede for a second? Because I wanted to look up for anybody who might not necessarily understand what a chairman it is. And this is no disrespect to anybody, just because it's a different terminology, but they are, in my book, CEOs in their own particular right. I Googled it, so this is Google, y'all can throw this in. I Googled what is a chairman's role. Role of a chairman is responsible for leading the board and focusing it on strategic matters, oversees the group business and setting high governance standards. He or she plays a pivotal role in fostering the effectiveness of the board and individual directors, both inside and outside of the boardroom. I looked that up because I know a lot of people, whether you're talking about co-chairs, whether you're, again, because it had came up in the Anita Bonds. Was it Anita Bonds? I'm sorry, I'm saying the wrong person, not Anita Bonds.
Funny enough, when you mention this case of like Judge Webster is a perfect example of how you can be Black but not necessarily have the same ideology or think the same way.
No, this is very true. And what happens when you have a person that is the chairman and when you have a person that sits at the helm of it, I think this is where a lot of Black people get frustrated in terms of whether it be the Congressional Black Caucus, whether it be the NAACP, which we'll talk about a little bit later. A lot of those organizations have white men helmed at the top of the organization. And most importantly, because they are able to garner and attract dollars, because that's what it's mostly about. A lot of organizations concede, a lot of Black people concede to their positionality when it relates to trying to build an institution, just based on the fact that the fact and reality of the matter is this is capitalism, and so you do need money. So to navigate that, unfortunately, people give up a lot of that autonomy. And what, like you said, when you have those views and when you have those experiences that are anchored in whiteness, it's hard to,
I would say, empathize, because
empathize and to be able to articulate them to them the point that is absolving some of what is their selves, in terms of, because most of these organizations, UNCF, NAACP, and all of the organizations that we're talking about are centered and anchored around uplifting Black African-American people.
But this is what throws me off, is like, that's the same thing as the radical Republicans in the Reconstruction. And then the North abandoned it after the North ran out of money. Maybe I'm just coming from the perspective of like, this isn't new. You know what I feel like most of the time? I feel like Billy Porter imposed when he was like, y'all think y'all get invited to the party. There's a certain degree I feel like that young Black people don't believe about their elders. It's like, understand this. White people may love you, but they don't love you enough to pay for you. And until white people get enough love for Black people to actually help franchise our lives, it's all going to feel performative.
Is it all going to feel performative, or is it all performative?
I can't make the distinction, because some of them may genuinely want to do it, but then we're talking about a whole different economic system. Because we're talking about, and it's important, because let's look at China.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to get there, but we're going. My thing is with China is that they come in wherever there's a weakness. We don't have to talk about Africa. We can talk about Eastern Europe. It's like, if you're having a problem with China and how aggressive they're being, and you're pointing out something that's very real and that's going to keep growing, it comes a time where being American is not steeped in this nationalism of the lost cause, or for most people, the Klan, where being American is steeped in patriotism, and every neighborhood is made resilient through an education system that is closely tied to our economic system, what our jobs need now and not what they used to need. We need our kids to understand what it is that is going to be demanded of them from high school. We keep getting into this debt trap because high school isn't good enough for people to get a job. That's the problem I see in most of Black America, is that we got to constantly go in debt just to keep up. It's like, if we get to the point of understanding, like, I don't necessarily believe that these white people are going to give me the money to maintain, therefore I won't allow, they can't come to the cookout. That's what I'm getting to. If this is going to be the head of your institution, they can't come to the cookout because they don't understand our life.
I can agree to that to a lot of extent, because I think in this, as African Americans, ADOS, Black Americans, and again, I prefer the term ADOS, American Descendant Slavery, just because it's more specific and politically it allows for that, and everybody's specific.
I'm an
on paper,
mod.
On paper, it works. On paper, what we see right now is the falling of identity politics, even in terms of how people perceive, whether it be Latino or Asian community, all of those are still capture-alls, just like Black. But to stay on point and to stay on target, I do think that we have to lift that standard to what is being admitted to the cookout. And I think one of those things is how you go about creating not just opportunities for tokens or tokenism, because I think that is what a lot of donors who come in, whether it be through opportunity zones or the John D. Rockefellers, JP Morgans of the world, you position certain individuals without, like you said, creating the opportunity for those African Americans, Black people to move autonomously, despite what it is you may believe as a white man who comes from a particular experience in a particular ideology. Similar to how, if you look at the GOP versus the Democratic, the DNC, what you see in the numbers is that the GOP has a younger threshold in terms of the overall participation varied by age. And what you see is they have a better pipeline for talent, despite whether that talent agrees or disagrees with them.
Because that's part of the GOP's conservatism of that freedom. But it also comes and you have to have a level of pedigree. And that's a problem with American politics. Everything is about pedigree. If Jimmy Carter was running today, he'll never get in because he isn't rich enough. If Harry Truman was running today, he was a 40-year-old man living with his parents, he'd be laughed out because he was a failure. Like, America wants to microwave success. And that's where I, as a person who thinks of themselves as a global citizen, kind of laughs at America. It's like youth is it's great for its vitality, but it isn't great for the decisions that really need to be made in this moment in time. Because again, we're talking about resources about education and how people are educated and how they are able to matriculate through a economic society that is heavily driven by capitalism. When we look at who's the head and who's the chairman and how those resources are dedicated out, what people got to understand is that that chairman has some influence on how the grant is written. Or the money is dedicated for the grant. So the chairman has some kind of focus. Most people don't like to be too heavy-handed, but this is the principal agent problem. Because you don't have the cultural understanding, you can't understand the social structure. You can't necessarily understand that a child can be an A student if they had the social supports for the real world outside of their life. They don't necessarily have a parent at home helping them take care of things when they get there. They don't necessarily have a parent at home that is promoting them getting the education. And the problem is that, and that I can identify, is that too many people want to say what Black people and how Black people need to live instead of just allowing Black people to goddamn live.
This is true. Can you drop the link in the YouTube thread, just so anybody who want to call in as we get into this discussion going? We done got through the main part for the most part, because the next thing that I wanted to bring up is we wanted to go to some other institutions, man, some other institutions. And for everybody watching, can you like the video, share the video, leave a comment, leave your thoughts. It's about engagement. It's about trying to build a consistency and see where everybody is so that we can come to an understanding. And again, if it ain't nothing, if we can come away today with what's the standard of how we invite people to the cookout, that's a W for me. Because we just be inviting everybody to the cookout.
It is not, my thing is, I never want to bash on white people. It's all about white culture. And it's never
bashing on white people.
It's never an individual thing. It's really more
collective. Like I tell white people all of the time in my space, look here, collectively, y'all do.
We have to call out the people who play into it because they find those values analogous to their values.
I agree.
And when I say those values, I mean Victorian values, Edwardian values. Instead of saying, oh, you acting white, it's like, how about we just identify it as it is? It's like, that's a very Victorian and Edwardian way of looking at the world.
The reason why it is said as whiteness is because it stems from their culture. And this is the thing. Though Black people, POC, or individuals across the spectrum participate in it, it is something that was developed by a particular group. Whether it's right or wrong is a whole different conversation. But
I think it's just convoluted. It isn't clear, but
it isn't clear because again, this is why I always push for if you really want to get down to it, let's get rid of Asian, let's get rid of Latino, let's get rid of Black, let's get rid of white. Let's get down into the ethnic cultures within each one of those drop down menus to really pinpoint who comes from what. Because the issue is that you want to be Irish one day, but then the next day you accepting whiteness just because it's beneficial to you. Or you want to be Latino one day, but the next day you want to be white because it's beneficial to you. Or you want to be Black, but the next day you will participate in exceptionalism and all those other different things because it's beneficial to you. Candace Owens, i.e., right? So it happens across the board, but that's the thing with whiteness. If those people who fall under that drop down don't want to continue to capitulate and reinforce it, they have to step outside of it.
To step outside of it means you have to understand what's going on because
I agree.
It's like the fishbowl. If I'm born and raised in this, and this is just me.
But do we give an excuse to our own?
No, I'm not talking about any because I don't ethnocentrism. Basically, the thought that all knowledge starts with the ethnic group leads into exceptional, therefore nationalism.
Mm-hmm.
My thing is, in America, if we want to put America first, it's American Black, it's American Asian. Even if you keep it, it's American Black, it's American Asian, it's American White, it's American first. But the problem is Black America, White America. You divide America when you say Black America, White America, Asian America. If you say American Asian, it's like the base becomes America. But in order for the base to be America, that means that we actually have to have a pedagogy. We actually have to have a curriculum. We actually have to have principles and values that we agree upon. We do agree upon certain things in America.
Like
money.
That's it.
Come on, my guy. No, it's not even, that's
okay.
it. It's also status. The money is more so for the status. It's not even the money for the money's sake. It's money for the status. And if you don't believe me, you can go to Alexi the Tocqueville. It's like we have to understand that America didn't throw off all of the old world shackles of what it means to be successful. Still in America today, what it means to be successful is the same bourgeois ideal of the French Revolution. We got to understand that in the French Revolution, that we get the left, the right, and the middle, and the center. All these terms from, you had people who were in the professional class deciding things. And that's what we have in America, the professional class. So when we say John D. Rockefeller, when we say all these people who were the head, because I'm staying on track, were ahead of, was it UNCF?
Mm-hmm.
In NAACP, that's because they have the money, they have the resources, they have the credibility that will get more funders. And that's what the problem is with that monolithic narrative. If you continue to feed into tokenism, if you continue to feed into exceptionalism, you feed into poverty porn. And if we want to redress how Black is always equated to poor, we have to get people to understand it's like there was never a such thing as an entirely Black poor population. There was never a such thing as an entirely Black enslaved population. More importantly, this Black thing is the same thing as saying Oriental. Getting to your point, if we narrow down onto the region and to the geography, instead of putting all of that inside of one little label, we get into a much more needed and nuanced conversation about policy that need to be made, not only monetarily, but also the non-monetary policy. The things, the soft things, how do we talk to each other? How do we treat each other? What do we value? Because a lot of people don't want to be respected, they want to be revered. I talk a lot.
No, you good. I can agree to those points especially to the extent that again, I needed to completely be removed because the catch-alls I feel like is the impedance to the progress because people pick and choose when they want to step outside of the catch-alls and then when they want to participate in the exclusivity.
Gotcha.
But for the sake of order, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna talk about and we're gonna bring up the NAACP. I wanted to bring something different because as we all taught.
They don't get mad at us.
Yeah.
We chose Wikipedia as a source.
Ooh,
we about to get in trouble.
About it, I could do it. I tried to find something different. I tried to. But nobody else had it listed. And I really just wanted to point out right down here where it talks about the formation. And this is fact. I did verify that part of it to make sure that everything was intact. So when we get down to it, because what I want to get to before we get to outside of organizations like the Congressional Black Caucus or the NAACP, et cetera, I want to talk about how these organizations are founded, who particularly is reached out to when founding these organizations and how they're backed. Because to your point, yes, when you talk about political institutions, especially, it is heavily built on, who you can get to donate, which we'll get into later in terms of like political campaigns and et cetera, and how those things are pushed. But down here, it talks about who the national president is. Moorfield Story of Boston, who is a white man. Again, you can click on these. The chairman of executive committee, William English Walling. The treasurer, John E. Millihandan. Then you have the dispersing treasurer, Oswald Garrison Villett. And then you get down to the executive secretary, which is Francis Blaskia. And then you get down to the director of publicity of research, who is W.E.B. Du Bois. And the reason that I, go into that's the NAACP, was incorporated in a year later, 1911. I wanted to bring it up, though, because as I was researching it and looking it up and trying to find, I text you, I'm trying to find an organizational structure of the past cohorts, like similar to how I'm the vice president of DC Young Democrats right now in 2021. In 2050, somebody should be able to look up, oh, this is y'all organizational board structure, y'all board of directors, et cetera, right? But with that being said, when we look at and I was able to find who was the inaugurating members, it's the same thing. And I wanted to be able to bring it to people on paper because you don't really get into Black leadership in terms of presidents and CEOs of the NAACP until you get into the civil rights era. And that was one of the faults of W.E.B. Du Bois, I would say, despite his progress, because I like W.E.B. Du Bois for a lot of reasons, and then I don't like W.E.B. Du Bois for a lot of reasons, right? And so founding this, putting in the work, I can't take that away from W.E.B. Du Bois. But when we look at the organizational structure and when we are talking about how this Milton Jones being the first Black UNCF is so, oh my God, what? Of a Black organization? Of a Black targeted, marketed organization? How? And with that, we see again in another organization that we hold dear to us, NAACP, almost go through the same progressions in terms of leadership. And because again, I don't want to go into donors just yet because that's a different conversation. Yeah, that's a different conversation in terms of even if you have the leadership, who you get your money from dictates kind of how you move. But even in terms of their founding documents and members, what do you make of outside of W.E. Du Bois, them being white? And I mean, of course, this is 1911, so
it's
bear with
1911, we talking about the Great Migration, right? So in 1911, we talking about millions of Black people who are coming off the plantation. The Freedmen Bureau has failed. It has failed. Northerners went to the South, didn't do too much, recorded some things, try to educate Black people, but Jim Crow quickly comes in. The Redeemers quickly come in, the white terrorist organizations that became the Ku Klux Klan, burns down things, people. To continue the hierarchical system of Black being helots and whites being Spartans. But let's modernize this. Let's go from 1911 to 2021. I know who Black people love more than the NAACP.
And who was that?
Louis Vuitton, Moet, and Hennessy. How much has Hennessy donated to the NBA? How much has Hennessy donated to HBCUs? We got a French conglomerate that donates to HBCUs because Hennessy is consumed that much by Black consumers. On top of Hennessy or LVMH, who owned Fenty as part of their portfolio, the makeup. I love Rihanna for making that makeup. You gave a whole lot of different skin tones and undertones presence inside of stores in which they had no presence, and that matters. But on top of that, you have the Kering Group, because people talk about Gucci this, Gucci that, Gucci this, Gucci that. The Kering Group, another French conglomerate. So when we start talking about politics, we need to also talk about the dollar vote. Let's talk about the economics of the things too. Because a lot of this, oh my God, you got to play the game, is like you sound like Booker T. Washington. Lower down your pail of water. But you don't know that Booker T was loved by Carnegie because he was sending Black bodies into industrial zones in which they didn't have it down just yet, so that they were protecting them. We got to understand that in an economic system, this color line thing shows you who was able to have an easier access to capital, but it doesn't mean that those were the only people who had access to capital. And W. Du Bois being a researcher and not necessarily the head in the direction goes to Professor Deborah Gray White when she's talking about how Black people are studied by white scholars. And that takes Black people being skeptical of how we're being portrayed, being skeptical of who is saying what and why they're saying it, because that's what comes out a part of the African diaspora. I don't have to ask what will happen if Caribbeans are being misrepresented. We know how a Trinidadian is going to act if they're being misrepresented. We know how a Jamaican is going to act if they're being misrepresented. We have to get past this cancel culture and get into curation of our culture. That's what the 90s was for me. Like, we're a 90s baby, 1990, man. I can remember around 97 when you kind of had every expression of Black. You can turn on the TV, you had Living Color, Living Single. It's like you had the goofy Black, you had the serious Black, you had all types of Black, and none of it was like dumbing down. But we got to this point where, well, it sells, so we're going to dumb down ourselves and go right back to minstrelsy. And it's like, no, I'm going to hold you accountable, because when we go outside in these neighborhoods and we go outside our neighborhood, they don't necessarily respect the jokes, the wit, the intelligence that comes with playing the dozens, that comes with joning, that comes with making the jokes. To them, it's just Black sounds. So when someone is stepping to us, we got to, boom, switch over like, excuse me, I'm sorry, but I think you're mistaken. This conversation was not for you. If you do not understand, you can please distance yourself from us. Because at that point in time, you show the people to call it code switching. It's not code switching. It's speaking to people in the way they know.
Uh,
I know that light went out, but it's okay.
it is. It is. So what I'm gonna do is because I do want to. Let me see. This is the live, so y'all gonna bear with us a little bit. Boom. Hold on, give me 1 second. So we back. I was about to say, if we can, I didn't know that was going down us that fast, but it is what it is. We gonna keep on pushing.
We got anything interesting in the comments? Because I know we went over a couple of different things, and it's kind of getting heavy. I'm being a little long-winded, but I need the gravitas and the weight of people being shocked to set in. It's like, you should not be shocked by this. It's American history. You should not be shocked.
And speaking of, what's your thoughts?
So for me, I just need people to really understand that we are broke. Like, we don't have it in terms of the capital. All of these things. So when people see like, oh, the first Black to do this, or they put one of us in a position, understand there's a difference between really having the power to uphold that position and just being a proxy. Because that's what I see a lot of like Black people entering these Black positions are. They're proxies. And for those who don't know what a proxy is someone that's sent to represent a majority. It could be anyone that could be a proxy. But that's pretty much how I would describe our experiences in a lot of these positions. We're proxies for whatever agenda or whatever organization we represent.
Yeah, the Capitol Police chief, when he placed that well-deserved, nice tenured, long years of service to the National Capitol Police, only to be expected to say sorry for what it is that they failed to plan on when she was not necessarily directly in charge of those plans. So I get exactly what you're talking about with the proxies and being used as a proxy to deliver a message or execute a certain level of, to execute a certain thought. Like almost like the Tuskegee Airmen or the Buffalo Soldiers. Like, you go in first, then we're going to see if it's safe after you die.
Exactly. And it's like we got to start to recognize that and call it out, because we look at every little thing as progress, and it's like, we got you. Just like that. You right back in.
Gotcha.
We just gave y'all a little something real quick, posted up some Black person in a position, and you right back on board. So we got to start recognizing, okay, we know what this is. We could be proud of having a first Black something, but also we got to recognize that, okay, as a collective, we don't have the wealth to really support a first. So we can't put all of our stock and all of our...
No, because I got an interesting thought on you saying that. And it's an interesting question. How much more power, no, not even much more. How do you think Stacey Abrams will be able to wield power if and I don't, at this point in time, I'm not even thinking about corporatism. This is a thought experiment. How much power would Stacey Abrams be able to have if she can go to a bank trust of Black American or Black women to fund her campaigns? Like, how powerful do you think she would be?
Way more.
Like, how much more policy would she be able to? It's like, I don't have a power as a politician. I just have a problem with the fact that as a Black woman who isn't tied to capital and how politics work in America, she isn't able to be as effective. So my thing is, to your point, Quan, is like if we were able to have a well-funded Stacey Abrams or well-funded AOC or Presley, and they were well-funded, how much policy will we actually get?
Yeah, but see, the problem is that I see is that we would rather pick the Black people that they have to look a certain way in order for us to really give them our support.
But that's where white, but no, that is where white people or white affluence gets their leverage in terms of investing in and funding other business, because what people capitulate to is optics. Like how we talked about, people wanted to look and be a particular way.
That's wild.
I don't know when you wanted me to bring this Joan in, but because what I wanted to, bring up casually is that when we talk about like, Black marketed versus Black owned, because I think that is the conversation that we're having, because a lot of people are under the assumption that this was a Black owned institution, organization. Even when we talk about and look at people, like I said, Charlemagne and the Breakfast Club, what people have to understand is when you talk about those type of organizations, they're owned also by white people, like specifically for them, like, because I had to look it up, WWPR-FM is owned by iHeartMedia. iHeartMedia is owned by Bob Pittman. Bob Pittman is a white man. Charlotte. So when you talk about like, people who get on rap, or whether it be social media, Cardi B or Megan Thee Stallion, but what people I think have to understand about all of that, whether it be male gangster rap or female, whatever people are upset about right now, which is just as vulgar as both, which is why, I call for a moratorium on it all until we rectify ourselves as a group and get in line and understand, because again, for me, a lot of these things, because they're positioned the way that they are and because who's investing in it, perpetuates a cycle that is to our detriment, whether it be on a male or female side, which I think is nonsensical to argue.
But this is where I would say, as Black men, we gotta go with the sins of your father. Like, I'm not going to speak on Megan. I'm not going to speak on Cardi. I'm not going to speak on.
I'm speaking on all of them.
On Mulatto. I'm not going to speak
UGK, all of them.
I'm not speaking on them because we gotta be mindful. And this is why I got my beef with the elders. It's like, look, especially when it comes to Carter's Heights, you all talk to me about fruit trees and everything else. When I came around, the fruit trees you grew up with were replaced by pipeheads. And I've been trying to get a lot of Black elders to understand this. Is like, look, growing up in the inner city, you all had Chocolate City, and Chocolate City was so great for you. But I came into Chocolate City when it wasn't Chocolate City. Or it was Chocolate City, but you couldn't trust.
It was Dodge.
You couldn't trust anybody on anything. So those fruit trees became devious and malicious individuals. And that culture of mistrust and distrust continues. But because of UGK, Pimp C, Bun B, and all the rest of them made their money, Scarface, Juicy J made their money off selling an image, I'm not going to sit back and judge someone else off the image. There's a whole nother discussion we can have. And there's a whole anthology, Hip Hop, That's the Joint, that talks about how rap literally gets down to the capitalism in America and how it gets straight to the capitalism in America. But when I brought up the joint that you're talking about, the Ann Casey Foundation, Race for Results, I just wanted to show that we can just leave that in the comment section. We ain't gonna bring it up necessarily. You ain't gotta bring it up.
You sure?
Yeah, I'm sure.
Bring it up just a second. Go ahead, talk, and I'm gonna take it down. Just so they can screen cap.
And the Race for Results, it talks about if you invest in the infrastructure of education and the education actually translating to economic gain, you get a bang for your buck, because the crime rate falls because people have opportunities. It's not like people are committing crime because they want to commit crime. But a lot of people are committing crime because they don't have the opportunities. When we look at African American children, we have to look at African American children in the spectrum of they are coming from ancestors that were intentionally enforced upon ignorance, that was steered away from capital, steered away from economic life. You had a lot of what most Black people did being the labor force. And that's where Black flight in the 1960s and 1980s is so important, because when you have Black flight, you also have the brain drain. So as Black people moved to the suburbs who had the intellect, who could have filled the professional roles inside of the city, they decided to maintain being connected to capital. They didn't want to fill the civic role of being leaders that can use their political and professional knowledge to uplift the social capital. They kept going for the money. And I'm not going to sit and blame people, because in America, money is about the survival. And that's how we got to get to this point where we got to understand it's like we need funding because we don't have it in our families. We can't go to, like Master P already talked about it. We can't go to somebody who's like, hey man, I'm down a couple of million. You gonna give me $1 million? Ain't nobody gonna be out like that.
Shit, I can't even go to you and be like, I'm down 1,000.
I'm down 1,000. Shit.
You can't get $5.
Exactly. And so when you're walking around there, and y'all know I don't understand stunting. You know I don't understand it. It's like you cannot stunt on a group of people who come from poverty. And that's the problem. We've sold this image in America that if you are not affluent as a Black person, something's wrong with you. It's like, no, that's not how it is. If you are broke, if you ain't got nothing, if you are struggling, you got bad credit, it's not because you are a failure. It's not because someone told you, not because you are not capable. It's because there was none of the resources put in front of you to show you where you can be capable. There was never someone sitting next to you showing you that how your temperament can make you money. You have to figure these things out on your own. Whereas when you get into quote unquote white spaces, there's always this intergenerational step. Going back to GOP, you can become this, you can become that, you can do this, you can do that. And there's someone guiding you along the way. So there's never this thing of uncertainty. Someone is showing you, physically showing you what it is you can do instead of you having to imagine. And that is the biggest problem with segregation. Some people live in neighborhoods where they're professionals and some people do not. So the social capital shows that those who don't have any access to professional environments, as the economy move on, they fall behind. And then the professionals, because of the damage that poverty has, like I was thinking about this earlier, why is poverty necessary if we have waste? If you have food waste, why do we have food insecurity? That sounds like some stingy shit to me. If you got food waste, how can you have food insecurity? And we're talking about social justice and economic improvement. And we look at the zoning laws, most of the Black neighborhoods and slums were in industrial areas. And if we look at the asthmatic rates and the public health, you can see where Black and brown, predominantly in America, because again, it goes across all, Black and brown, as well as a resurfacing, because it's not new. We can look at Thomas Nash when it comes down to how Asians have been depicted in America. Because when we talk about the melting pot, it's the melting pot of Europe.
Can I say something about that?
Not the world. Yeah, please go ahead.
Part of the reason a lot of people within the POC community suffer. And I hope and I hope that I'm able to have a conversation with a longtime friend, is that a lot of you all need to stop perpetuating exceptionalism, the model minority, and through that, white supremacy. Because it's hard for me to speak out and advocate for groups who also look down on African Americans. And I appreciate the people who are willing to acknowledge within their own groups that anti-Black American sentiment, because that anti-Black American sentiment allows what's happening right now with whether you want to speak to the Puerto Rican community, the Latino community, the Asian community, all of those things have been allowed and strengthened by the perpetuation of anti-Black American, ADOS, African American sentiment. And I only want to say that to say that if you don't correct that, because that's how all, especially if you're in here, like we were talking about, as Americans, if you're talking about an American, whether you're American Chinese, whether you're American Japanese, whether you're American Nigerian, whether you're American whatever, Irish, whether you're American Scottish, whether you're American whatever, right? I need you to understand that everything in this country that is to your detriment comes through the African American community, through the ADOS community, through the Black American community, because that was the initial foundation to when this country put its articles of incorporation in for submission. I'm willing to have the conversation across any spectrum. I can only speak for the African American community. That I feel comfortable with doing. I can't speak for white people. I can't speak for any other community. But I can give you an idea on a sentiment about how we feel. And in most cases, I would say that Black Americans are so playful that they don't hate anyone, which is how we've gotten to this point now. For the most part, yeah, we gonna joke your ass. But as we all know, as you know, as a part of the community, it's lighthearted, even though it will irritate you and get under your skin. It's not the same as being anti.
Yeah, that's when we decide, because I'm gonna go to Quan after this, when we decide to be vulnerable, that's not for the camera. That's not for anybody that's not an ally. That's the cookout. When we decide, because I wrote something, my mother released a book, I was listening to something, shit brought tears to my eyes. It's like, when you take one of us, you take a whole support system. And we can lose our life because somebody angry with a gun decide that instead of calming down, they just want to take our life. So you gotta kind of understand that state of mind that people have. So when you value yourself enough to go, nah, you really don't love me that much. We can come to the bar, we can chill. We can go to the park and we can chill. But how my house is and how I raise my kids, where I lay my head, I got a problem with that because you see Breonna Taylor. I got a problem with that. You see George Floyd. I got a problem with that. You see Trayvon Martin. You saw Emmett Till. You saw all of that. Sandra Bland, you saw all of that. But you still think I'm violent. You still hypersexualize the women. You still think it's okay to dominate with your cultural presence. So it's like, no, we cool here, but I want you to know, you may not be racist, but you damn sure not anti-racist. You damn sure comfortable enough with letting the asshole in the room be disparaging towards me.
The racists in the room.
The racism, but you gotta say asshole because then people.
No, because the asshole is we're not going to disrespect assholes like that. Because you can be an asshole and not be racist.
This is true. But all racists are assholes.
But
because they don't care about people's feelings.
Just to piggyback on what both of y'all are saying as far as the anti-Blackness, one of the biggest things I feel like we gotta do is we gotta begin to really regulate the entry point into anti-Blackness and anti-ADOS, because you got a lot of teenagers and young kids whose first experiences with Blackness come from social media sites like TikTok, where you got people that emulate like Black what they call it, motifs, the ghetto black girl, the ghetto black man, and they can look like anything. They can be Asian, they can be, and it's all performing what they believe blackness is. But it can be taken as a matter of fact, not even can be taken as, it is anti-blackness. Because if you're telling me that the only thing that you can see to do on TikTok is to perform the worst aspects of black life as you see it in media, as you see it in all of these different situations, it's like you don't know us, because we so much more than just whatever you see that you can reenact on TikTok to get a bunch of views and have a bunch of people reenacting these things as well. Because when you come in the room and you got a whole bunch of children coming in, and all they know is what they see on these social media sites as blackness, then when they become people of power in 10, 15 years, these are the things they're going off of. They only know us from a TikTok challenge. You know what I mean? A George Floyd challenge. These are real things that are going on in these social medias. That's why I say some of this stuff needs to be regulated, especially when we talk about the ones that younger people could access. Because I remember a time where you had to be a certain age to access social media.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Now it's just a free fall. You be 10, 11 years old, just out here in these social media streets.
So what we're going to do now is we just going to go ahead. For everybody who is watching, please like the video, share the video, leave a comment. And we would love for some more call-in. So we just going to stay around for a little bit, chop it up. If you want to call in, the link is in the thread. If you want YouTube, is the link in the other formats?
Yeah, it's in the Facebook.
All right.
In the YouTube.
So if y'all want to call in, get y'all opinion on, this first Black and how the first Black is kind of, for me, being played out. But, it is what it is. Everybody, everybody love identity politics. I was listening to Jimmy Dore earlier, the DNC, their pushback on Andrew Yang, and even on another Andrew Yang fan. I don't disagree with the DNC and pushing back on Andrew Yang because Andrew Yang,
what did he do?
Because he came out in position with particular policy stances that favored, I guess, conservatives. I think that is as you always allude to, the Carter personality in terms of, again, Andrew Yang, the only reason he's in the running for being mayor for New York is because he ran for president. And so he has that social capital that is used. But I think it is disingenuous that you can disparage him as a quote unquote right winger or, fraternizing with them when we have a member, the leadership, the president of the United States, who has made a point to, and again, in Joe Biden, who's made a point to cross the aisle. And his whole talking point was being the middle.
So politicians are mad like everyone else is mad. Like, y'all need to join us. Come join us. Come join everybody who think they get a bit of attention. They know what the fuck they're doing. Yeah. Come join us. Because we frustrated. Because y'all hold on for a second. Y'all love to uplift those men. Y'all love to uplift the ones that made it through the economic system. And like, oh yeah, this person is so great. Now they coming for y'all bag. Now they coming for y'all. They coming to make sure that they get the space. Because that's what Trump did to the right. And we see how the GOP is getting fragmented because of Trump. The cult of personality is everybody. It's getting everybody bent over. Because now it's not even about fame, because we covered this. For fame, because of the sake that you did something. It's fame for fame's sake. And Andrew Yang running on his plan because he's popular doesn't understand the true due diligence and craft of being a politician and a statesperson, because we don't respect craft anymore. Anybody who can look shiny enough and have enough money for the back production and the post production can come out in front of the people and say they know what they're doing. That's the difference between having a craft and being an artisan and just being popular. Popular is the only thing that's selling. Who has enough attention for craft? People don't have the attention for craft.
So craft take time.
Because craft takes time. So you can't expect a politician to be 23, 24, 25 years old. How much does a 23 and 24, 25-year-old know about running a household? We got to understand that politicians are people who are making decisions for the yet to be born and those who are always almost crossing over to the dead, and how we allow the dead to be buried and so forth. We got to really pay attention to that. Politics isn't this thing where, oh yeah, I don't like those people, so I'm going to get those people out of office. I don't give a damn, because I'm here to tell you, if you don't collect the trash on Tuesday, now we got typhoid. If you want to take something over, you gotta prove that you're responsible enough to do it. And that's what Andrew Yang is hilarious to me. I'm looking at politicians like, that's okay. Y'all crowded. I think of politicians as bureaucrats. The bureaucrats pushed out the craft people. The bureaucrats pushed out the people who said these things take time, because bureaucrats want to show things on paper. Paper looks nice. You can mimic things on paper, but the paper during the Trump administration, Wall Street was booming, but people were hungry. Are we going to see the same thing in the Biden administration is my question. Because if we see the same thing in the Biden administration, I look at the DNC and I look at Andrew Yang and go, what you expect? He's talking to the people, not you. The people want to feel something. They don't care about your procedures. They don't care about your protocol. They don't care about none of those things. The people need something now. Not what you promised them if they can do this and do that. And that's why people lose their faith in politicians. It's like, you're not delivering me anything. Because I did that before. I did this and I did that. I went to school. I got the degree in the debt. Where's the job? And that's where politicians are failing. And anyone who's willing to promise people things is coming in and getting attention. That's my thing.
Trump.
And my biggest thing is like, okay, if you're gonna call Andrew Yang conservative, what do you call the 8 Democrats that shot down $15 an hour? What are they?
Conservatives.
Centrist.
I'm a centrist, but they conservative.
No, you're a centrist relative to
the political
no.
The ideology.
To a rational society.
Oh, gotcha.
You're not a centrist as it pertains to American politics. American politics, you're far lefty.
How?
Because
am I far left?
Because you got to understand, when you talk about American politics, is that it's completely far right. The foundation of it is slavery. It's completely far gone from there. On point. That's what people don't want to acknowledge. Is that when you talk about, again, and Elizabeth Warren, she's not left. She's center right. But because America is wonkers, hence, i.e., trying to blast them, because again, you all don't address your genocide. You all don't address your ethnic cleansing. You all don't address your class issues. You all don't address any of that. So Elizabeth Warren and Democrats as a whole, in terms of leadership, are more center right, if not just right.
Yeah, okay. I would agree.
But it is what it is. We don't have any call-ins right now.
So
if you can, like the video, share the video, comment, follow us, subscribe, go to our website, thegildedsages.com. Check out the blogs. We're going to have more op-eds. We're going to have everything else coming. We do have our HR 40 here and up. We're going to be putting up more reaction videos. That's exclusive content. So check us out. Engage. Again, DC Young Democrats, we having our general body meeting this week, March 25th, Thursday, 6:30. Join us. We here. Also, check out Herb and Temple. We're doing a cleanup tomorrow, Sunday, Anacostia, if you're here in DC. So thank you. You all be safe. It is what it is. This nigga acting like he's surprised.
I
Like
ain't
America.
acting, but it's true. If the president does it, it's not illegal.
It is.